Um, Welcome everyone. I think you know the agenda for the program. We have been running Civic Revival now for 6 months or more. Started with Richard and I in the spring. The world's been changing all the time since we began, so it's given us a lot of food for thought about how we run things, because we were hoping to have more face-to-face events, and we've had a lot more online ones. Just to remind you of our mission, we think our position is somewhat unique, and others have said that, in that we aren't concerned with a particular subject area. What we're concerned with is the whole agenda for civic activism and localism. And our first task was to try and define that space. And we came up with 5 elements which we think... Can people please mute themselves while we're presenting, because otherwise we get extraneous noises. We decided that we draw a diagram of our 5 areas of special elements that come together as the civic agenda, and you'll see them there, and I hope some of you have seen that before and have explored some of the elements of it on our website. Just to summarize, we think what adds up to a good sense of civic and local identity and achievement is placemaking, both new places and older places being curated, an approach to pride in the area and the culture and the character, a recognition of the need for responsible and sustainable activities and lifestyles, embracing new economic and ownership models, and finally, but by no means least, genuine local democracy and citizen action. Now today, we're beginning our series of 5 monthly discussions leading up to the preparation of a manifesto, which we would like to put into the discussions ahead of next May's local elections, which are a bumper set of elections because of the ones postponed from this year because of COVID. And we feel that if we can have a discussion going in the run-up to the elections, we'll be able to put in front of candidates our belief in what real local civic activity should be, and hopefully get some of the issues that we believe are important discussed in the run-up to the election, particularly perhaps in areas where there are some new local activists standing for election and would like to embrace our agenda. Tonight, we thought we'd just look at the background to the whole civic area of activity and what's happening at the moment, and why this is, in our opinion, a particularly timely moment to be having a discussion like this. As you'll see there, I believe that this is a time when we need to look at civic revival and new local democratic empowerment. But in order to do that, we don't want to use the traditional lens of national politics and the institutional approach to governance and planning and all those elements of administration. We want to look at it from the point of view of ordinary people on the ground locally, and what matters to them and how it might be better addressed. And the challenge is to try and understand what people want at a local level, what's meaningful to them, and is hopefully not fundamentally party political, but is more about the common values people would have about where they live and their community. What might be the ingredients that really tick their boxes as being important, and as I've indicated from our bigger analysis, that local pride identity, community empowerment are some of those. And are there any particular issues at the moment that are significant and might resonate above all others? Next. Just to give you an overview of some of the things that we've kicked around and I think are important. One is that local is not the same as national, and the politics of local need not be just an echo of national politics. Now, we can have a discussion, and hope we will, about the role of big politics with a capital P at the local level, but my belief is that it's not the way to start a discussion. It's better to start with something different which relates to the particular location. I've already mentioned pride, and I think at the moment local pride is manifested in a number of ways, but it does seem to give people a lot of themselves satisfaction to see that there is a pride being taken in the area they live. I think it's important that local activity looks at what's being neglected on the national level or not recognised, and can highlight that for its meaningfulness at the local level. It's good where there's a diversity of people involved and doing different things in different ways, but all adding up to something worthwhile. And then one of the big challenges is in an era of big governance and big business, the system, which could be anything, but particularly the planning system, for example, can be leveraged to the advantage of outsiders or special interests when it ought to be there to benefit local people. And I think that's a key issue at the moment, and it's coming up in a number of places about the way local points of view are being overlooked and large interests are taking advantage of the system. And the other thing, which is a bit more supported from a national level, is to support the capability of people locally for their enterprise and enthusiasm in bringing benefits to where they live. They could be economic or social or environmental, but it's getting people on the ground to contribute in a way that suits them and isn't part of some master plan from above. Next. So just running through these very fast, because I'll probably run out of my time allocation now. I thought that there are some issues at the moment in terms of governance, which I'm sure some of you are aware of or involved in. There's obviously the response to COVID and the politics of the levelling up proposition that this government has had on its manifesto. There's the question of local government structure and reorganisation and unitary and county and district, and that's a hot topic, I think, in government circles at least. There's the question of alienation and apathy amongst the electorate and what things are regarded as important and what are regarded as a turn off politically. There's the question of what resources are available and how they're allocated. And then there is this question of let's try and look at some new alternatives and whether they get enough airtime. Next, please. And then, as I've already alluded to, there seems to be a thing at the moment about big ideas and big money being the solution to all problems, when smaller scale and local things might be better, and to give local activities the support they need. Then there's template approaches which perhaps don't allow for expressions of individuality up and down the country. And finally, there's the pressure of corporate suppliers, and particularly in the retail and leisure industry, wanting to do kind of rollouts of all the same things up and down the country. Next one. And the last one, I think there's a bit of issue at the moment about how information flows around. We've had a contraction of local newspapers and local media due to economic change. We've got what I perceive to be a degree of closed door decision making under the cabinet system in local government, and the ability of a small group sometimes to do things which not everybody knows about. There have been quite a few stories about autocracy and cronyism in existing local government. Obviously, there's the use of spin to communicate without full discussion. And the last one, I'm not sure how far it's gone, but there is a potential, I think, for greater digital democracy and information exchange using the internet and online and digital information exchange, which is flourishing in some areas, but not everywhere. I think that's the end from me to just kick off some of the issues we want to talk about today. But the main point I'd like to stress is that we want to hear from people on the ground how it feels where you are, and so we can incorporate real examples and real experiences into the message we want to put across collectively. Thank you. It's Richard now.
So, Richard now.
Hi everyone. Before I just say my little piece, welcome to everybody who has just arrived. Unfortunately, Eventbrite created a new bloody Zoom address for this meeting, so some people are using an old email. I think everybody who's coming is now here, so sorry for that mess up. We'll get that right next time. And apologies to those people who still aren't here. But I'll probably be doing that because they'll probably start phoning me up whilst I'm trying to speak. Anyway, just on the subject of the manifesto, I just wanted to do a really quick couple of slides, which Tom might be able to show here. Just the next slide, hopefully, Tom. Yeah, so we call this mapping the territory, and one way of kind of mapping the territory is what I've called here the many routes into getting involved in you know, I want to do something to improve where I live, to improve my favourite place. And I'll just talk you around the clock of this stuff. And what I think what we're trying to say is we want, you know, our manifesto to work for all forms of civic activists, you know, all forms of people who get involved. And because I think there's a bit of a gap we think there's a bit of a gap in the market for bringing people together who arrive at this stuff from different routes. So, I mean, the first thing is some people start with the place or a building or the built environment. You know, I want to save the pier. I want to, preserve the clock tower or whatever. And some people start with a people focus, or, you know, I want to improve my community. I want to help people where I live. And they're both valid. I mean, that's what we're saying, but we're just saying people do come at it from different angles. And if you look at the top of the charts, the kind of traditional route in, if you want to improve your place, is to speak to your council, which can be one of three tiers. And we're quite interested in the lowest tier of parish and town councils, a Civic Revival, and we'll talk about that later. But if your council's not responsive, if you don't like how they react to your proposals, you join your local political party and try and influence the council that way. And in extremis, you can stand for election and get yourself elected and thereby take control of the council so that it does the things that you want it to do. So that's the kind of traditional route. Obviously, there are other things not quite as extreme as standing for election, and people join local charities, local civic societies, traditional place-based charities and groups like Rotary Club, Lions Club, what have you. I've called that traditional civic voluntary sector. And obviously people come at it through their faith group, their churches, whatever local congregation you happen to be a member of might start to do charitable stuff in your local community. And those are what I call traditional routes, as is coming at it from a local business perspective. So traders associations, chambers of commerce, more recently business improvement districts, which of course you don't get a choice to join if one's set up in your area and everybody votes for it. And another route, which is perfectly valid and is increasingly important, is what is known as the other public anchor institutions, which might be universities in some towns, it might be the army in another town, it might be a big hospital in another town, it might be Bentley or Rolls-Royce in another town, or that kind of thing. Then I just wanted to kind of pick up another route in, which is people who come in from a kind of, like a campaign or a cause or a concern. So I've called that the green focus. So, you might be, I want to address environmental issues. I'm concerned about climate change. So you come in via, things like Local Agenda 21 in the past, transition towns in the last 10 years, convergence groups, local sort of networks of local green groups is another way in. FOE groups, local groups, are absolutely part of that as well. And some of those are kind of networks of local groups, and some of them are kind of branches of national charities. So if you join your county wildlife trust or your local branch of the RSPB or something like that, then that's another route in. Another way in, I'll just be very quick here, is increasingly, and we're interested in the new economy at Civic Revival, is via social enterprises that are trying to do stuff in your local area that are created. And there's this new sort of movement which we call community wealth builders, people who are trying to do things through cooperatives, trusts, and so on and so forth. And all these people are part of the ecosystem. And the next slide, Tom. We are hoping that we'll have a manifesto for Civic Revival that makes sense to everyone in that kind of route. So I don't want to speak for too long, but if you could just bring up the next slide, Tom. So we've had a quick brainstorm of items that we could deal with in the manifesto. There's quite a long list there. I don't intend to go through them in detail, but what we're intending to do is we'll be creating a kind of working document that is interactive. It'll be on the Civic Revival website. And as people come up with ideas for things they'd like the manifesto to cover and to say, we'll sharpen up that list. We'll maybe add things to it. We'll maybe take things off it if people want more focus. But by the end of March, we will have a document that hopefully we can share with everybody who wants to run for, because there's a huge splurge of local elections next May, stuff that's delayed from May this year, stuff that was always due to come around May next year, and it's at county, combined authority, mayor, district, and local parish and town council level all over the country. There's about 5,000 different election battles going on next May. So we want to say to everybody who's standing in those that, what's your reaction to this agenda that we put forward, and we'll be sharpening all those ideas up into proposals that people will need to, have an answer to. And we'll then be able to say, you'll be able to use that in your community to engage people who are trying to win office. And, if their answers are unsatisfactory, they might end up having to, deal with a new candidate who is backing these kind of approaches. And that's why we're working closely with Flat Pack 21, which we might say a little bit about later. But I think I've probably said enough for now. I mean, do have a quick look at that list, but we can put that up later when we're having further discussion. But I don't want to delay the discussion further. So back to you, Nick.
Okay, Richard, thank you. I'd now like to ask Viv from Bexhill, and I think David as well. Is David there? I can't.
Yes. Yep.
Oh, excellent. Yep. So, Viv, take it away. Tell us about Bexhill and Bexhill for Democracy.
Unmute myself for a start. Bexhill by the sea, of course, very traditional, conservative, white area. It's been very unhappy with it. It was very unhappy with its council over a long period, and since 2011, people were campaigning for better local governance and to have their own town council for Bexhill, rather than just the Rother District Council, which covers 192 square miles. In 2015, we set up Democracy for Bexhill, which campaigned for a town council and brought about a community governance review. We campaigned like anything, and 9,000 people responded to the consultation, of which 93.5% wanted the town council. However, the sitting district council refused. And people were so angry about that decision that we then decided that we would stand and for a town council in the next district council elections. So we did, more or less as a gesture really, but on the night it was extraordinary because we just wiped the board and 17 of 18 councillors in Bexhill were pushed out and replaced by people who promised to set up a town council. Those people from Democracy for Bexhill are now our district councillors, kept their promise, and in December Rother will create the community governance order to set the town council up, having put it through full council scrutiny, all the rest, which is all held transparently with Zoom access. But at a very exciting point here, it's very important that we find the right candidates. It's important that we have something unifying which will inspire people to vote for those candidates. And I would make a plea for the manifesto, if possible, to be couched in words that anybody can understand, so that perhaps we can use it in our campaigning. But anyway, we're looking for support here, and it's been quite an exciting ride so far. We just won't want to mess it up at the end and get a really good town council. Okay, that's me.
Thank you, Viv. David, would you like to add anything to that?
No, but I could add 1 or 2 points that would then lead me on to the conference that I think you wanted me to briefly mention. Shall I do that now?
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay. Well, because it will be a sort of a blank sheet of paper for this new town council, in that, unlike other areas, we haven't accepted any asset transfers yet from the higher district level. So we will not be looking after laboratories and a few allotments and a few things like that, which is what normally happens. We'll just have a town clerk, very competent, we hope, and 2 assistants and a small budget, and a blank piece of paper, really, in the context, of course, of huge cuts. So Rother's grant from government will be 0 in 2020, and demands will be even higher than they were last year because of aging populations, COVID, and everything else. So difficult times. So in order to inspire Bexhillians that despite difficult times, we could do amazing things, we're organizing a conference on March 28th currently called Empowering Communities Through Localism. And it will be attended and addressed by national speakers at one level. So the woman who runs or is the chair of something called NELC, the National Association of Local Councils, which has about 10,000 local councils in it, she will speak, as will other inspirational people. And we'll bring people from afar like Preston, which is the poster child of what's called community wealth generation, where you basically bootstrap yourself out of a poor economic position by utilizing large-scale organizations you'll find in your area, like a prison, a hospital, a college, a large office block or whatever, and use them as a means of generating wealth. No time to go into details. We'll then have about 15 little workshops covering everything from health and well-being to participatory budgeting. And the idea is to bring people from afar and perhaps near who have done stuff innovatively with not much cost, but with lots of panache and community involvement, in order to inspire Bexhillians that, you know, you're only confined by your imagination and money, of course. We're discovering there's lots of money out there, which many larger authorities just either don't know about or don't apply for. And so one of the tasks of the town clerk in the first year would be to bring in all this money potentially that's out there. And there'll be inspirational things like a small parish of about 500 people who managed to get a deal with a developer whereby they got 12 affordable homes gifted to them by the developer. And the guy who managed to pull that off will be explaining how he did that. So that's the conference. I'm guessing it will now be virtual. It was going to be in the iconic Delaware Pavilion here at Bexhill, which is a large cultural artistic centre, but we might have to be virtual. The last point to say is that we would very much like Civic Revival and Flat Pack Democracy to co-host this conference, because it would seem to fit very nicely with your two agendas.
Thank you, David, very much. Now, presumably there will be more information about the conference in due course on the website, Peter. Is that right?
Well, I will send you the latest version of the agenda, Peter, Richard, after this meeting. It's still in creation, as you'll see from it. So speakers in red are yet to be attracted, and speakers in black are confirmed, etc. But you can put it on the website now. I think we've got an Eventbrite address as well. We do have one already, through which people can express interest in being there. And of course, the advantage of it being virtual will be, I guess, anybody at all involved in anything like what you're describing here, which is exciting, could sign up for it. So we might have quite a big conference.
Well, I'd also like to perhaps put the manifesto content into your program.
Absolutely fine. That would be just great.
Should chime very nicely in both timing and content.
Yes, the only slight hiccup that I've got recently about the date, which has been fixed for a year now, is that because it's within the 8-week PERDA type period prior to the elections in May 21, I've already got a letter from the chief exec of Rother saying that he and his councillors can't possibly take part because it's within PERDA. That's not a big deal for me, because I don't really want councillors and chief execs. I want people, activists from communities more than anything else. But it might inhibit, for example, the leader of Preston District Council, who is down to speak already. It might inhibit him. So I need to work on that a little bit, and it might mean bringing it forward perhaps 2 weeks so that it's just outside of the PERDA period, i.e. middle of March, first, second week in March.
Thanks, David. Viv, I think, wants to add something. Is that right?
It was the same point, that we might run into PERDA. I think that would be a pity. So I think we'll have to rethink that a bit, probably. Okay. So in a sense, it might be better not to post any information until we have settled on the date, so as not to confuse anybody.
Okay. Thank you. Now something very different. We're going up to Crewe, and Chris McGarrigle is going to tell us about basically retail issues up in Crewe.
Yeah, hi, thanks for inviting me. I've got a couple of croutons, if you call Bexillians, we call croutons. So I've got Ben and Richard from Crewe as well. So we've got a slight problem in Crewe. We've got a legacy regeneration project in the town centre, which is retail and leisure led. Obviously, with COVID coming along, in my view, it had no legs anyway. The previous schemes had no legs. This has got no legs. Cheshire East don't seem to realise it's got no legs and seem to be proceeding at all cost. They're in the process at the moment of trying to get a towns bid together, and they've appointed a new Crewe Town board to facilitate the town's bid. So they've appointed consultants. The consultants are saying nothing new. As I say, over the last 20 years, we've had promises and promises. We've had consultants' reports after consultants' reports. We've had engagement after engagement. But obviously, as everybody knows, life is so different now. We've got a pandemic. If it didn't work before, it's certainly not going to work now. So I've been shouting at the council and gone through numerous planning officers, regeneration officers, and every 2 or 3 years, new ones come along, and we have the same sort of discussions with them, and nothing ever gets done. So, as I say, they've got the opportunity of a lifetime. We've got a 1956 brutalist concrete framed structure that they're just about to knock down. I went off trying to get it listed very, very recently, but unfortunately there's nothing substantial in it to get it listed. So literally we've sort of washed our hands of it at the moment. Sorry, yeah, Ben's just put that up. So those are the buildings on the left-hand side. Marks and Spencer's were in the town centre, and they've literally pulled out of the town. So the town is literally a ghost town. There's nothing in the town at all. It's just getting worse and worse every day. I work in retail leasing. I'm a chartered surveyor. Rents are now lower than they were in 1986. So the chances of a construction build allowing any sort of development on this scheme is nigh on impossible. But as I say, the Cheshire East are still moving ahead, trying to get the scheme with some legs. They've appointed consultants to endorse their project, not particularly to sway away from it. So obviously I was approached by Nick, Richard and Peter early on the week, and invited me today. So if anybody's got any views of how to disrupt what's going on, I think that's probably the best word to describe it. You know, we need some disruption there to change what's going on and change direction completely. But Ben's a lecturer at MMU, and he's garnered some students on an architectural course who are doing a project on Crewe. So if we can encapsulate them, we can show an alternative and perhaps present an alternative to the people of Crewe rather than Cheshire East. I think Cheshire East are myopic in their thinking. I don't honestly think they're going to change. I think they're intent on producing a scheme that's got no legs. The problem is they've just signed up a development agreement. I've challenged one of the board members to get hold of that development agreement, because it will be no more than an option, which will be conditional upon a multitude of tenants. So what we're going to get, and Peter picked up on this on Tuesday, we're going to get a hole in the ground that's going to sit there until times are better. In the meantime, we could have a vibrant town centre, we could have new uses, we could have alternative uses, we could have outdoor cinemas, we could have street markets, we could have a whole host of vibrant uses. I mean, I don't think there's probably anybody on this call tonight that doesn't know how to make a town centre. You know, it's well documented, it's well studied. But as I say, the council are intent on proceeding forward with the myopic view, which simply won't get built. And I'll guarantee that we'll be here in 5 years' time if we proceed down this avenue. So what we need is an alternative. And as I say, Richard works with the Chamber of Trade in Crewe, and Ben's his forte is active travel and cycling. So we're looking for alternatives. We're looking for a bit of help, and we're looking to sort of engage on Arnstein's ladder of participation to get citizen power, as it were. So that's what we're here for. I don't know if Ben or Richard want to add anything at all.
Ben or Richard?
Well, Ben's there.
Yeah. Hang on. Let me see if I can get a picture up as
There's
well.
Richard, yes.
There we are. I think I'm there now. Yeah. I agree with Chris there. I've had a meeting actually today, and Chris doesn't know this even, with the Crewe Town Board, because a Crewe Town Board has been formed to get their hands on this town centre regeneration money that's circulating. And I think there's been one or two publicised, the latest of which I think I saw this week was Blackpool, where they've been given a slug of money to enhance the quality of the illuminations, given the economic importance to businesses in Blackpool of those. But I agree with Chris, without going over the same ground, the talk today was all about significant capital expenditure projects that don't deal with the main thing, which is the old Royal Arcade, which Chris mentioned and Ben showed a photo of. All the engagement is regarding other projects. For example, we have a retail centre which is within walking distance of the town centre. It's not out of town, it's almost in town. But people go there and don't go into town because there's nothing to go into town for. There's talk now about a link between the retail park and the town centre. And that's a major project looking at what's proposed, involving several £100,000. So whether that will happen. But then there's talk about doing a bit of a cultural centre, a digital centre. But against all that, there's still this huge, and I don't know, Chris, what the square footage is, but it basically dominates at least a third of the town centre, and that they are still pursuing this. And I agree with Chris, this forlorn hope that there will be a town centre development. Are we there? Am I still there?
Yeah.
Sorry, I've lost my picture. So it's really a bit of the main focus appears to be this redevelopment. I mean, I'll give you an example I quoted today, and I hope this staggers you, because it staggered me when I realised it. I've just applied for an alcohol licence for somebody via the Chamber to open a restaurant in the evening selling alcohol in Crewe Town Centre. If that goes ahead, it will be the first and only restaurant in Crewe Town Centre that will be open after 5 o'clock. And Crewe has a population of over 70,000. And yet the town centre does not have a functioning restaurant. And that to me speaks volumes as to, you know, where the low base we're starting from. But yeah, the issues are the council, if you like, Cheshire East Council own the Royal Arcade, which is the building they've emptied and intend to demolish and intend to redevelop. The Cheshire East are heavily involved in the Crewe Town Board. So there's a bit of a conflict of interest that I think, as Chris suggested, there is still a use for this building. And I know Richard's commented that it's, it's probably not the way Chris described it. He's been more sympathetic with the architecture. But because Cheshire East have got their own agenda involving the Royal Arcade, they own it, so they're looking for a return on it. It won't do them any good to let art groups go in or community groups, because they'll get no return. So the difficulty we've got is we've got the vested interest of the local county council of the borough. So until we can separate that, we're going along this blind alley of a development that is not going to happen anymore and not feasible in the current pre-COVID or even post-COVID life that we're going to be engaged in.
Can I just add a small thing to that about civic process here? So I'm a mere resident, and something struck me forcibly yesterday. They've got a swathe of different consultants coming in asking our opinion, and the woman said, frankly, Ben, what is the really underlying problem here? And I said, I think the underlying problem is that all of the council staff, I won't call them officers, the staff, live in the most richest affluent county in Britain, Cheshire East. You've watched Housewives of Alderley Edge, whatever it's called, Housewives of Cheshire. They all come from that, and very few of them actually have to come into Crewe for anything. And I think the reason why there's not the engagement is maybe the same with Bexhill, I don't know, is that they're embarrassed, because when you say, well, if you turn left at Victoria Street, they've got no idea what to do. So they're employing consultants, and the one that I spoke to yesterday was from Lancaster, who'd never been to the town at all. I said, well, why don't you ask the kids in the school? It's like, it's a bit difficult because I'm in Lancaster. But of course, if a county council employee was to ask my opinion, I would instantly know much more than them, simply because I'm on the ground with the geography of it. And I think that's why they've consistently got any consultant, as long as they're not within 100 miles of the town, literally 100 miles. And I think there's something about you on the big plan about the engagement of the general public and the local people, I think is something really key there. I don't know what the solution is.
Well, I think that's very interesting, and certainly in Hastings, the joke is that no consultants can be employed unless they come from north of Watford.
Yes, yes.
It's absolutely.
Or south of Watford.
There are loads of people with huge amounts of expertise within the town who just are not involved at all.
There's two in this room.
So thank you very much. And now we're going to move up to Lancaster, actually.
I hope it's not the person I was speaking about.
Interestingly. And we've got James Wilkie.
It's me. Can you hear me? Yeah. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes, fair. Thank you.
Get on with it. Okay. I want to speak about Lancaster Vision, but I'm going to say a bit about myself first of all. And it's not through ego or arrogance, but it's relevant to what I'm going to say about the work of Lancaster Vision. And I suppose you could describe me as a gamekeeper turned poacher, because I spent my entire life working in local government. But 2012, I decided to retire. And then I thought, what am I going to do? I didn't want to be a consultant, and I really didn't want to work because I had a job, quite a good job. And if I'd wanted to work, I'd have kept doing that. But I wanted to do something. And interestingly, from the perspective of some of the previous ones, I became a town councillor, but did a number of other things as well. 3 years ago, I moved to Lancaster, and I got involved in the Civic Society. Now, Lancaster Vision is a branch of Lancaster Civic Society. But rather than just looking at history and heritage and architecture, it's actually focused on how we improve the town, the city, how we improve the local community. I'm not going to say too much more about that, because if you want more information, we've got a website, there's lots of stuff on the website, people can look at that. But I just want to talk about one particular aspect of what Lancaster Vision is trying to do. And that's what I would describe is around liberating latent capacity, okay? So the background to this is, if you look at the organisations with agency to make change in local areas, probably the most significant one is the local authority. Since 2012, the local authority, 2010 rather, the local authority has lost a huge amount of resource base, 40–50% in some cases. So they've got real issues with capacity. You then layer COVID on top of that. And as we come out of COVID, most local authorities are looking at plans for how to rebuild, how to reform, how to move forward. But they're doing that against a backdrop of a lack of capacity. Now, one of the things that Lancaster Vision has tried to do is to position itself with the local authority as an organisation that can help liberate some of that community capacity to try and support the sorts of things which the local authority are doing. Now, to be perfectly honest, it's been quite a hard sell, because we've had a number of meetings with the key players, put the offer on the table. But what we've done recently is we began to do some small projects with the local authority. And that's really been an attempt to try and establish our credibility and our credentials moving forward. And the reason I spoke about myself at the start was that in most towns, in most cities, there's a whole range of people who have got skills and expertise that are not being used. And the local authority default model, as a previous colleague says, is to run off and hire consultants. Now, actually, there's a whole range of people in local communities who have got skills. Now, I have got a view that many of those people don't want to get involved in a town council, or don't want to get involved in a broad sort of approach to civics, for want of a better word, but they might be really interested in transport, or they might be really interested in tourism, or they might be really interested in education and have skills in those areas. And the approach that we're trying to take in Lancaster Vision is to use that as the lure to get people involved, because most people don't want to sit in bureaucratic type meetings. But if they've got a passion for something, and they've got a knowledge for something, my belief is that, like me, they're probably quite willing to give of their time. And we do have a number of people in Lancaster Vision who have got skills in particular areas that are now deploying those skills on civic type projects. So I'll just finish by saying that, having listened to what you said earlier about your manifesto, I think there's lots of good stuff in there. I think this is a really complex, difficult area. I think one of the key things to make progress on those areas is actually understanding how the organisations with agency actually work. So basically, to get the best out of local authority, you need to know how it works. You need to know what levers to pull, you know, to do. You need to know what not to do. And again, there's lots of people in the local community who have got knowledge of those organisations, not just local authorities, but higher education institutions and so on and so forth. So, as I say, if you want to know a lot more about Lancaster Vision, look at our website, but I'll stop there.
Thanks very much, James. That's terrific. Right, we're now going to move on to Dina. Cole from Cole is going to tell us about Colville. Dina, we can't hear you.
Apologies. Yeah, I was just saying thank you for inviting me. And I'm Dina from Colville, a cooperative CIC called Think FC, bringing people together. Completely agree with everything everybody's been saying about building on strengths and interest and bringing people together based on their on those particular interests. Oh, let's move on. How do I move on this? Oh, there we go. So, going to Colville, what we're doing is we're helping people come together and connect. And when those little connections happen and carry on without us, that's what we're really interested in. So we're helping them set up something that's missing off your list, and it's a community benefit society. I only found out about them last year, and I think they're real agents for change. Most CLTs are CBSs, and if you don't know what CBS is, which I'm sure you all do, but most people in communities haven't got a clue. And if they did, and if councils knew about them, perhaps, you know, we could get more stuff going. So that's what we decided we would do in Colville. So Colville Can CBS, which stands for Communities and Neighbours, we've helped set up. Part of the reason for doing that is to try to be an ethical landlord, so take over some spaces and buildings that enable people to do stuff they're interested in, support people setting up their own co-ops, their own enterprises, however small, and also at the same time help people start community projects, and within doing that build a community wealth fund so we can keep things local. As you've already alluded to, there's loads of empty buildings around, and we've identified quite a number in Colville, and I'm not going to go through them, but one of them I just thought I'd point out was an old cooperative superstore. So we've got places like Central England Co-op and the council that you'd think would be more community minded with their buildings. I've, you know, listened to what some of you are saying, and maybe not as much as they should be, but we think this could be a really cool community retail enterprise and accommodation space. We've brought in numbers of partners, and we've put a pitch into the co-op to say, don't sell it to a developer, sell it to a co-op, a community CBS. So we're actually in a position now where the board have got it on the table, and their asset managers, who would normally recommend selling it to a developer, are actually not making a recommendation. So we've gone so far as to convince them that actually this is too uncomfortable for them to make a recommendation that it should be sold to a developer like they normally would. They're actually not making a recommendation to the board to enable the board to hopefully say that they want to sell it to us. This is another example of a building in Colville. It is a market, been there since the 1970s. So we think it could be a really cool event and exhibition space used by everybody for lots of different enterprise and community activity, including young people's venue. This is what it looks like inside. It's only used 2.5 days a week. This is what it says on the council website. It's, you know, it's completely useless basically, and it's a waste of space. And this is what our architect says, amazing architect who just thinks it's the most amazing building ever. And you just think, why is this difference? And this is what some young people think could happen in there. So what we're trying to do is change the way people think and get them thinking, actually, this is possible. We could take this over. And so just a little, going back to Community Benefit Society, I'll just put I wasn't doing a quiz, we haven't got time. But if you don't know what a Community Benefit Society is, they are the ultimate in democracy and community control, and they are featured in the new How to Be More Pirate books. If anybody hasn't got a copy of that, I suggest they get one. There's 3 pages about Colville and how community benefit societies are a potential route to social change. In Colville, we're building a crew of local people who have got all sorts of different skills, and we're also building together a support crew of people with with expertise that might be drawn down from either with that. So somebody from further afield is being used because they're the champion in community shares in the country, but they'll be training our local people how to do community share offers. So we're going to get the expertise that we need and help train up local people and find the expertise within the community and build them all together. And what we've created is something called the Wicked spreadsheet. Now we've done this with Cooperatives Assistance Network down south, and together we've created a Wicked spreadsheet, which is a quick building viability tool. So with one spreadsheet you can work out the viability of a building. It's going to be, well, it is already released on open source, so it's free for people to use very quickly. The yellow is the input, the green are calculated for you, and the pink are the important numbers. Shove in your building names. There's some assumptions in there, you can play with those, but there's some already in. You can look at what potential grants and in-kind contributions you might get to towards one of these projects. It then works out the total costs and what you might need, plus the income that you might generate, and then it works out the split of loans, investments, and community shares. The really, really magic bit then is it gives you a 30-year forecast, which includes a community wealth generation line and a balance sheet with cash flow for 30 years that you can cut off at any point to show where it becomes sustainable, or what grant will be paid off, what loan will be paid off when. There's a summary of important results that you can then use. And I don't know how long I took, but I know we're short of time. So that's my very, very quick run through what we're doing. Happy to share that. And then this one, I've just put it in the chat. This is Community Asset Bingo. I'm going to stop sharing and I'll show you it for real. So we did this in a market the other day. This is a board, and it's basically got all the different assets that you might find in the community, from stories to people to buildings to institutions to transport. And you can just play with this. You can download it off the website, but we did this in a market the other day, and we had them pre-done so that nobody could get COVIDed. They were all stuck up. Families could take them away, have a little play with it, bring it back. So this is Community Asset Bingo, and it's on our website, and you can just download it if you want to. Cool engagement stuff. So hopefully that was useful and a quick dive into Colville.
Great, Tina. That was very, very exciting. Great.
Come to my conference and share it with the conference. That will be just great. You're on the agenda already.
We'll be happy to.
Yeah, thank you.
Good. Now we move to David Beeman from Farnham. Are you there, David?
Yeah. Hello, Nick. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Well, I feel like a bit of the establishment here, having the contributions so far. I personally have always believed that national politics should play no part in local government decision making. I did that when I was in Dorset. I stood as independence. I didn't get anywhere. And in fact, when I moved to Farnham in 2010, I then stood as independent and did get elected, mainly on the backing of a local people's sort of back. The previous Liberal Democrat, who had been turned independent, he backed me, and I got in that way. Anyway, so we go on, and then in 2000, the Town Council, of course, which is a very powerful body, in my opinion, and I think people ought to become involved in these town councils and such. Anyway, we move on. In 2016, we then formed a group of like-minded people who believe that local government decision-making should be taken by local residents and not by political parties. So we formed a political party, believe it or not, called Farnham Residents. Now, we're not whipped or anything like that, but we now control the town council, and we also are now in control of the borough council in association, not on lines, and there's nothing written down, but we work with the Labour group, the Green Party group, and the Liberal Democrats, and one independent to form the administration. Which means that we have to take all the difficult decisions now, of course, which is always very tricky, of course. And we are making, I mean, there's so much to say. Farnham is like a population of 40,000 people, and you know, if you ask, and there's 40,000 different views in Farnham, actually, believe it or not, and it's trying to get it all together. And anyway, we are making progress. Look, here we are. You can see that. We're now working with the borough council, the town, and the county council are working on a scheme to improve the infrastructure of the town. Eventually, and So it's all working, but it's all because of it's personal chemistry. This is why it works, and you have to give and take. Issues now. One, neighbourhood planning is the basic one to me. That's the most it's imperfect certainly, but it's the most democratic way with plans being put to the people for referendum. In Farnham, it was ratified by 95%. Yet we now face in the new planning white paper that there'll be a downgrading of what neighbourhood plans are. It should be built up from neighbourhood plans, in my opinion. Certainly that's one thing. Secondly, of course, it's finance. It's somewhat aggrieving to some people. For example, Waverley Borough Council, which is now, of course, facing a huge hole in its budget, but we're going to get over it by some creative accounting, I hasten to add, without making anybody redundant, I hope, is that at the end of the day, we're facing a lot of money in our business rates. It's not even kept in the borough, but it's taken out by central government. And we've really got to define now what is the role of central government. Is it local government? Is it just an administrator putting forward applying central government policies, or is it a situation where local government really is truly local government? And sadly, of course, Surrey County Council now want to create one mega authority, which is like an administrative function, and we're going to fight against that because we think we ought to be looking at more local level administrations. And certainly we think from those unitary authorities introduced in Cornwall, we don't think that's the way forward yet, because they're creating these community councils which haven't got necessarily elected people on the bodies. So that's another issue. I mean, I could go on all that, really, but I mean, that's a basic thing for but I do feel like a bit of an establishment, really, because we're having to make all these difficult, once you have to face making difficult decisions, you have to make the books balance. We can do if you work hard on it. All for me. But I'll have to go at 7, by the way. Sorry, okay, Nick.
Yes, thank you very much, David. I can see that almost everybody could go on for twice as long. But I think we'll just have to have repeat sessions so that you can come again and say something else next time. On the timing issue, are people happy for me to keep going with more contributions? The alternative is to delay them until the next month. But unless anybody objects, I'm going to just continue with the people who've geared up to speak. So next is Anne Hitchcock from Gillingham, Dorset.
Thank you, Nick. Thanks. And hello, everybody. I'll try to keep this as brief as possible, knowing that people are moving on. I feel a little bit of an oddball here. I don't represent any community groups in particular. I don't sit on councils. In fact, I'm one of those dreadful things. I'm a landlord. I own a large building in the centre of Gillingham, which is a small town in North Dorset, population possibly in the region of 12 to 13,000, and one of 5 similar-sized small market towns in the north of Dorset. Now, it's significant that we're in North Dorset because there are many of us in this area who believe that our main local authority, it's now a unitary authority, Dorset Council, actually doesn't look much beyond the middle of the county, and we're an outpost, and so they tend not to pay us very much attention. That can have its advantages, but also disadvantages in some instances. So Gillingham is, despite being in Dorset, it's almost a commuter town. It's one of the few towns to have a railway station, and that railway station gives it a connection to London in just over 2 hours, and a connection down to Exeter in about an hour and a half. It's close to the A303, which gives it very good road links, both towards London, touching places like Andover, Basingstoke, and in the other direction, west towards places like Yeovil. It is flat, unlike a lot of other places in Dorset, and so has become a very good area for Dorset in general to build new houses. And it has vast numbers of new housing estates around a very, very small town centre. It's got very good schools, but again, very, very little in the way of resources for local people. So I moved here 20 years ago with my then partner, and we bought, we moved because of the schools really, and because of the communications links. And we ended up buying a very large building slap bang in the centre of town. Despite my ideas about the farm and the sheep and the goats and the chickens, we've got this ridiculous building with very little land and a lot of floor space. So it had been empty for nearly 10 years. And the reason why it was empty, despite being on the main town square, is that somebody, our local authority, had the bright idea of building a relief road which cut off the town square and killed it and killed the businesses there. So the building had been empty for a long time, had no services to it, and was too big for any individuals in the area really to have an idea as to what to do to it. Cut a long story short, we have redeveloped the building itself. We now have 2 floors of flats and 2 commercial floors. And in the last year have been in the process of linking the 2 commercial floors. The ground floor we'd let out and had tenants. We've had tenants for a long time, running it as a bar and restaurant, but they finally left last year. So, despite all of that, what I now have is a building that has become very important to the local community and is beginning to provide a focus for the town in much the way that I suspect the speakers from Crewe would like to do with their not so brutalist building. We have small office units, providing space for people who've worked from home and now realise that's not such a great idea. We have space for that gets used for individual meetings, for regular classes like Tai Chi and yoga and all sorts of things like that. We hold art exhibitions, we have art classes. And at the beginning of August, taking on the ground floor, we opened a cafe. So that cafe now provides the link for all the activities happening in the building, but it's become something of a community hub. Now, all of that I have to set against a background of verbal support from organisations, official organisations in the town, but no financial support. So I have to see it as needing to be financially sustainable because it's my money that's going into doing all of this, and I need it to wash its face. But equally, I'm aware of how important this building and its position is to the community as a whole, and I wish to continue supporting community activities here. But I'm stuck, you know, I am stuck between being this landowner, this landlord, and also wanting to maintain the building as a community asset without being worthy, if that makes any sort of sense. Now, the town itself has lots of buildings that are boarded up, shops that are empty, all those sorts of things. And I really am interested in exploring, and I think my reason for being very supportive of what you're trying to do with civic revival and putting manifestos together, is actually looking at ways in which we can break this ridiculous chain that this situation that we're in, of landlords seeing buildings purely as financial assets and not seeing them as community assets. And there's some other way of actually making our town centres sustainable and the buildings sustainable for communities and landlords. So any help from anybody around would be greatly appreciated. Thank you, Nick. I could go on for a long time, as you can imagine.
Yes, that was very good, and hopefully some people will come back with some specific assistance later on. Now, our final speaker is Noel Lynch from North Finchley.
Hi. I think I'm unmuted. I'm not used to this thing so much. My wife does a lot of courses and things on it, but not me. Anyway, I'm in North Finchley, which is in North London, and I run a small, I'm semi-retired, so I run a small charity shop called the Green Room, which 3 friends and myself set up back in '94. And the idea is to have an outlet for people can come in and talk about green issues or whatever local advice. I also worked in the advice service for quite a while, and this place almost doubles us in some cases as advice center, because people come to us for a lot of advice and things. And the problem, of course, is at the moment is that the council have decided to, in their wisdom, to demolish the whole street, including our arcade, which is the only place in North Finchley that has small shops, because it was old-time big shops. And the funny thing is, since the lockdown, the small shops are doing well, but the shops that are leaving the area were the chains, who are not doing well, and for very good reason, because they weren't giving good service anywhere. So we are campaigning at the moment, and I think we've over 3,000 on the petition to save the arcade. And we had the head of the Kings came in to me during the year, and he went home and wrote about it. He was disgusted because he used to buy his records there in the old days. And we got a full page in The Guardian from it, which must have had the council spitting grit. And apparently I've upset the developer who I said the whole plan was a corporate vandalism, and it apparently hurt his feelings. But you know, so much for that. But yes, we've the shop was described by Time Out as the most interesting charity shop in London. We don't have a normal charity shop. It's more like an old curiosity shop or a landscape, some people said. But yeah, where the whole idea is it's an officially not for profit, and that's good with the rents we have to pay. It is not for profit, and but as I say, the whole idea is to be able someone there to talk about issues of the environment and everything else. I have been agreeing, by the way, one thing you mentioned there is only one local town council in the whole of London, and that's in West London, and was set up a few years ago. And so we don't have the situation here. And the other problem is with local councils, which I don't think are coming up next year, they're fairly large constituencies, so unless you have the backing of a party, you generally will not get elected. The other thing that is coming up though next May is the London Assembly elections. Now that's for 25 members of the London Assembly, and it's run by proportional representation. I was a member there in Ken Livingstone's time, and it is completely different from councils or from Parliament, in that there is a fair bit of power among the city assembly members, and with only 25 there, everyone fairly well knows one another, and there was you have generally power of influence and power of speaking out. If you're an assembly member, one of 25 representing all of London, then if you say something and piggyback on a local organisation, you provide them with the reporters will come and take interest in, whereas the local group themselves may not be able to get the publicity. So I have been quite active in East Finchley, where Peter comes from, and in my time there, I was 10 years in East Finchley, and I helped launch the local newspaper, which is very important, and the local credit union, which I'm a great believer in. Haven't been in one in London or in Ireland and seen what it does, and the Traders Association. North Finchley is less of a community-minded area, but yes, we still talk about things and talk to people. And I think that's about all I have to say at the moment.
That's very useful, Noel. Thank you very much. I'd just like to now thank everybody for all the contributions we've had so far. We're now going to move on to an open discussion for the remaining quarter of an hour. Before we do that, is it possible to have a look at this cartoon, Peter?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you manage that?
Yeah.
There is a serious point to this if we can get it on. Oh, excellent. Great. The point of putting this up was really we were thinking earlier today that it would be really good in this manifesto to have cartoons and also to have quotations. And I'm just going to read you one quotation from, which is one of my favorite quotations from a book called The Well Away. And it's a motto suggested for Liverpool Council by the Eldonian Community Association in Liverpool, 1986. When we want your opinion, we will give it to you. Now, what we were thinking was it would be useful to get over the quite serious issues and very complex issues in the manifesto. It would be good to have some cartoons, some illustrations maybe, and some quotations. And so please, if you have any good ideas about that, please send them in. Right, now, we're now going to have an open discussion. So who would like to continue? The idea of this session is it's a bit like a sort of networking session, so that, but it obviously does need to be, somebody has to facilitate it. So I've got David G.
Just, am I unmuted? Yeah, just two slogans I wrote down listening to one or other of the earlier speakers. One was communities, not consultants. And the other one was more passion than procedures, which may or may not be useful.
Very helpful. Thank you, David. Yes, like that. Viv.
Yes, I just wanted to say that one of the very useful things for us, I think, and for perhaps other members, would be to know of sources of finance who are interested in preserving or building community hubs or buildings. in Bexhill, there are a few buildings which we would like to save. In fact, Claire, who's part of the group now, was involved in a community hub in an old Methodist church, which would be very good to save if we possibly could. And various people in the town have said, oh, I think there'll be money for that. And hearing Anne and other people talk about these saving arcades and so on, I do understand that there are some sources of money which could be tapped or pursued anyway, and it's supposed to be government policy to rescue town centres and to rescue old buildings, particularly churches. It'd be very good if, with your background in planning, you might be able to locate and do a list of possible places where we could find support, information, and maybe in the end, money.
Well,
I don't know if you want to add to that, Claire.
I was wondering if Chris might like to respond on that one, because Hastings has been quite successful in getting money for buildings recently, hasn't it, Chris?
Okay.
Yes, no, it has been. I mean, I suppose it started from the pier, when the large group came together to actually, you know, save the pier, which we did do. It didn't end up sort of fantastically well in the end. It ended up in private ownership in the end, but we did actually save it. But it was there's a lot of experience gained from that in terms of raising money, and there's a few individuals who, and it's a profession, raising money and understanding the terminology and the ins and outs and actually what's required. Unfortunately, there's a few people in Hastings who and we sort of managed to carry it on. And there's a White Rock Neighbourhood Ventures has been able to raise quite a lot of money and has started this process of buying up quite a large number of buildings in the town centre, and actually making them economically viable with a mixture of residential and commercial. Yeah. And it's actually transformed what was previously a moribund part of the town into actually probably, you know, it's in some ways actually more vibrant than some other parts of the town. And so we have a situation where there was another group, which was Sea Space, now of course it's Sea Change, which actually did receive many tens of millions of pounds of government money and overspent, and have actually ended up with a large number of empty office buildings, and they're going to stay empty. But whereas the office buildings that White Rock Neighbourhood Ventures have been doing, are all full, and there's great demand for them, because I think they actually make them exciting. A lot of people actually want to go there because there's a sort of a good, happy vibe. I think and it's actually that has an economic value, which is often underrated. It's trying to make something attractive, and but it's also allowing. I'll finish off with one example. Is that there's a Observer building, which is a redundant print works, and which has been recently bought, and it's still empty. They've got quite a few million pounds to develop it, but in the meantime, it's handing it over to people to do things with. So one of the things is that they've started off this week, actually, is building a crazy golf inside the factory, and together with a bar and a stage. And it's fantastic because it means that they're complying with the COVID regulations, and yet providing entertainment, and it's just local enterprise. It's just letting people loose. Anyway, okay, that's fine. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Anybody else?
Yes.
Anne.
Yes, I'd like to make just a couple of comments. One on the question of funding. Having had experience of going for funding in different organisations in the past, there are always strings attached. It always becomes, or not always, but it can become a constraint on what it is you're trying to do, and it stops you being light on your feet. It requires an awful lot of administration often, which adds costs that maybe you don't anticipate in the first place. So you do have to be careful, I think, when you're looking for outside funding for what you're trying to do. That's traditional routes of getting funding, as opposed to the sort of thing where you might be getting a business loan to do something. Which leads me on to my second point. It seems very much as though we are looking to traditional methods of dealing with property and projects, and it's all about, will the local authority allow us to do this? Can we persuade them to do this, that and the other? I really believe that if we are to make changes to the way that the places that we live look, not only must we work with local people and do things from the bottom up, we have to engage people. But it's really important that we work as closely with landlords and property owners and their agents as it is with local authorities. That's accepting that local authorities are also those landlords. But we have to break this cycle where property owners, landlords on our high streets see the property that they have as this financial asset that's worth X on the books. And if they can't get that X that the property is worth, they'll let it rot. You know, they will let it rot. We have to break that chain somehow.
Wow.
So that's my point.
I think we'd all agree with that. I'm just going to ask Peter or Richard whether you'd like to wind up, say some concluding remark.
I'll leave Richard to do the farewell and next business kind of thing. Just a couple of observations. It strikes me that we might be able to identify half a dozen or a few more theme issues that need a bit more work on as such, and that one you've just raised, Anne, is really a key one, which is to understand the way in which the property sector and those dealing in assets behave and how it's best to relate to them. I think Preston got a name check earlier, and I think there are a number of councils who have actually tried to work within a property matrix which doesn't involve seeking big Westfield into shopping centre money. There seems to be an obsession about chief executives and leaders of councils to try and hook some huge property companies to come in and ride into the town, knock it down and turn it into nirvana, which is very, very, very seldom going to be a success, but they keep trying. It's what you said from Crew, Chris. And I think it'd be good if we could write something which put a bit of insight into that. And if it goes in the manifesto and say, if you're standing for election, will you commit to not simply looking for strange financial investors to save the town and look at other solutions as well? And what you said, Chris, seems to suggest that there's such a closed view on anybody else having any good ideas if it isn't a big property company recommended by a big property consultancy. We've got to break that spiral somehow. So that was a good takeaway from today. And the other thing is all these interesting instruments, like the ones in Colville, cooperatives and community benefit things, we've got to do a list of those because I don't know them all, and I thought I knew most of them. Chris knows in Hastings we've got interesting institutional setups which have taken over these buildings, like this huge former newspaper publishing and printing building, and now they're being put to good use. But someone needs to know these mechanisms that are most suitable for particular types of property or site. And I think we need some advice from professionals who understand the property equation. Chris, in Crew, it's good to have people who are community activists and chartered surveyors in the same discussion. So I'm going to think we're going to go around and try and get a little bit more information out of those of you who've expressed specialisms that we can perhaps learn from. David's come in already. What, David? Hi.
Just quickly on sources of funding, I have a list of about 22 sources. For example, the Bright Ideas Fund, run by Locality, does exactly what it sounds like and is worth knowing about, and there's many more like that. And the Community Wealth Generation idea from Preston and supported by the Centre for Local Economic Strategies is very much about liberating assets that are actually in the locality already, but they're going they're outsourced, and what they do is bring them back in. I'll send a little note round on that. Plus
that would be wonderful. Yeah, if people want, the main point, but beyond that specific one, is to say, can we please network information as much as possible? Yeah. If you drop any information you've got, or little articles or thought pieces or examples to Richard and I, we'll make sure they go up on the site, and it will start a discussion with the knowledge we've got being shared. Anyway, I've enjoyed the discussion today very much indeed, and I've learned loads of new things, and it just shows you we've got about 30 people from 20, 30 different towns here, and there are thousands up and down the land who've probably got their own problems and their own solutions, and the more we share, the more we'll be able to all benefit.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just echo that. I won't detain everybody too much longer. Thanks everybody for turning up. I mean, we aim to have a great diversity of places and voices, and we certainly got that. I mean, thanks to James for mentioning that local authorities feel a bit beleaguered too, and they're not just baddies, they need a helping hand, and that's something that I certainly, landed with me as a point. Everybody's so the issue we've got is massive range of stuff and making sense of it all. The good news is we've got 5 months to do it in, which is a reasonable slug of time. We're going to keep meeting every month. I hope you've kind of seen that. Next month on the 19th of November, we're going to turn to what we called community empowerment at the human scale, proof of concept. So that's a place that's actually done it, which is Frome in Somerset with Peter McFadden and the Independence for Frome. He's going to lead the next session, but hopefully we'll have all yourselves back, everybody who's today, plus people you might think might be interested to listen to what he has to say. Unfortunately, Peter couldn't be here tonight because he's damaged his back, he's hurt his back. But he will be back in the saddle in time for the next one. And then there'll be further ones in December, January, and February, which we'll add more flesh to bones of later. But this concept of it being a open source manifesto, the website, as Pete said, is available. If you want to write as a piece, we'll look at it and we'll probably put it up. We've already done that for some of you. And I think it's been I hope everybody would agree, this has been a different an hour and a half on Zoom than you're used to. I've grown used to over the last few months, and I've enjoyed it, and I certainly have. So thanks everyone for sticking around.